Kick-ass facts, all idioms, all the time. But pew pew pew! Sleep tight. It's believed the saying comes from Shakespeare's time when mattresses were secured by ropes. During that time, sleeping tight meant sleeping with the ropes pulled tight, making a well-sprung bed. Piece of cake comes from the American poet Ogden Nash, who in 1930 was quoted saying, "Life is a piece of cake." Spill the beans. This saying comes from ancient Greece, where voting was done using beans. Citizens would put a white bean into the jar of the candidate they support and a black one for a candidate they do not approve of. However, on a few occasions, clumsy people would spill the jars, revealing the classified information. Pull out all the stops. Classic pipe organs have many sets of pipes, while the stops control airflow to each one. With all of the stops pushed in, there is no air movement at all, so there is no sound. Strategically pulling out stops allows the organist to greatly influence the quality of the sound. Pulling out all the stops activates all the pipe sets, so it results in a very full sound and maximum volume. Run amok. Amok, amok, amok. The word amok comes from the Malay word mengamuk, which means to make a furious and desperate charge. Writing in 1772, the famed explorer Captain James Cook noted that to run amok is to sally forth from the house, kill the person or persons supposed to have injured the amok, and any other person that attempts to impede his passage. Resting on one's laurels. Since ancient Greece, laurel branches symbolize victory and success. Laurel branches were given to victorious athletes in ancient Greece and later to generals who won important battles, thus the term laureates and the phrase resting on laurels. In the 19th century, the term received a negative connotation to describe those who were overly satisfied with their achievements. Eat humble pie. In the Middle Ages, there was a huge feast after the hunt. The lord of the manor would receive the finest piece of meat, and the ones with lower status would eat a pie filled with entrails and innards, which were also known as umbles. Those who would eat the umble pie were considered to be humiliated since it symbolized their lower status. Can't hold a candle. This dates back to the 17th century, and its meaning is related to one's incompetence. The saying came from talking about an apprentice who was not even skillful enough to hold a candle straight for his master. In short, they were worthless as an apprentice. Take the piss. Back in the day, when clothes were dyed with natural dye, stale urine was used as a mordant, which stops the natural dye from leaching out of the cloth. The textile industry needed all the urine it could get, so workers would go around collecting specially designated chamber pots full of urine from people's houses. It was probably the least desirable job at the time, you don't say. So people who did it would often lie about their profession, and so the question was born from those in doubt, really? Are you taking the piss? Let your hair down. In the 17th century, it was an important rule between English nobles to wear elaborate hairdos while in public, and some of the looks required hours to complete. Taking your hair down after a long day became associated with a relaxing ritual. To sell someone down the river. This one comes from 19th century in the southern states of America. During this period, it was already illegal to import slaves, so there would be internal trades where people would kidnap free black people in the north and ship them down the Mississippi River to sell them at market. For this reason, selling someone down the river symbolizes betraying someone and using them for your own good. The rule of thumb. The theory is that this one was about domestic abuse, but it is untrue. The actual origin of the phrase comes from milling grains in windmills. You would set the grindstones and run a little grain through. You'd then test by rubbing the flour between your thumb and forefinger to check the texture of the flour and then adjust accordingly, hence the rule of thumb. Paint the town red. Two versions. First, it's believed that in 1837, a famous mischief maker known as the Marquis of Waterford, imagine that being your legacy as a famous mischief maker, had a wild night out with his group of friends, during which they knocked over flower pots, pulled knockers off doors, and even broke windows. One of their biggest acts of vandalism was painting the doors of several houses with red paint. The other version says it might have originated from the brothels of the American West, where they referred to drunk men behaving as if the whole town was a red light district. More than you can shake a stick at. This was born when farmers who waved sticks at their herd of sheep had more sheep than they could control. Minding your P's and Q's also has a few theories as to its origin. One is the practice of chalking up a tab of drinks for later payment. The P refers to pints, the Q refers to quarts. Another has to do with the printing press. Lowercase p's and q's are mirror images, so typesetters had to be careful not to confuse the two letters when they were setting them up for press. Please as Punch. A puppet show starting in the 17th century called Punch and Judy featured a puppet named Punch who killed people and took great joy in doing so. He would feel very pleased with himself afterwards, which is where the saying please as Punch was born. If you have never seen the movie Dolls from the mid to late 80s, it's a B movie that is perfection. By and large is a phrase that's usually meant as a synonym for all things considered. It originates from the 16th century, where the word large meant a ship that was sailing with the wind at its back. Meanwhile, the word by meant the opposite, that they were sailing into the wind. The mariners used the phrase by and large to refer to sailing in all directions relative to the wind.